To be honest, I like the car. I just threw you, didn't I?
Yeah, you did, because, I mean, this really is very futuristic, and these are the headlights?
Yeah, these are lamps. I mean, you know, feel it. You can feel it. You can see these are lenses. I don't know how effective they are, and then maybe there's some other supplementary lamps to this, but to be honest, I really, really like this car.
And that is so surprising to me.
Much more so when I get around the side view. Front view doesn't do an awful lot for me, but side view, this thing is spectacular. It's crazy, it's over the top, but it's not trying to be an everyday supercar. It's more than that.
Well, I think what's a really amazing feature is you have these kind of hidden pods or nacelles for the side view mirror. And I get it that you're not going to have any visibility in this car, and so you're relying a lot on cameras. And these are very evocative of traditional Bugatti wheels like you'd see on a Royale.
Yeah, they are, but they're very much aero wheels. I love the way this crease line comes around, then it opens up. And maybe it's that I know the function that's behind every bit of this, and I really, really respect what they've done. This whole area is one of my favorite areas of the car. I also love the roof line. And here's where they use carbon fiber, I think, in a very smart way to help the whole shape of the car and the streamlined look.
I think this center spar right here is very evocative of the Jaguar D-Type, which is, of course, my favorite design of all time. And if you come around to the back of this, there are a lot of cars that have exhaust pipes that are evocative of jet engine exhaust, but this really pulls it together with that massive diffuser.
This whole view of the car, it's almost like an arrow with its feathers. It's, just all out. And, this is the third car that we've seen that we've talked about the center spine, which it has.
Crouch down a second and you look. Now, our good friend Bruce Meyer, of course, is consumed with badass rear ends.
Yeah.
This really is, because you see so much exposed mechanical componentry under that it really is one of those things that you look at and go.
Yeah, you can look deep in there and you see polished, suspension bits and all. It's cool.
Is this a blend of, say, 50% aesthetics and 50% functionality, or is it 95% functionality and 5% aesthetics, or is everything on this car designed to achieve the purpose of maximum speed?
Well, I think it's the latter. It's all about the vehicle's performance, and what I love is that it's all about performance, but everything has been well executed. Everything has been well executed on the car. I mean, they did not have to put this little crease line, that little fillet, and all that for it to function well, but they did. And they just made every bit of this functional beast.
Well, you know a little bit about designing for iconic brands.
Yeah.
Is it hard when you take such a dramatic step? I mean, if you look at the Veyron or the Chiron, it is such a different looking car than this. I mean, where do you find that corporate courage to really step out of the box and design something so dramatic?
That's the challenge. How far do you go? How far do you lead off base without getting tagged out? And that's the big question. This car, God, I'm just standing here looking at this. This whole view of the car is spectacular. But I think it's the front end. I mean, you know what brand it is when you see that face.
Well, that horseshoe collar, I mean, is really kind of iconic, but I think what's really cool about this car is you have the French tricolor here, you have the French tricolor there, and you go back, and this, if the Type 35 had been reinvented for another century, this really is it.
This is it. Down to the color, kind of a enhancement of the original color.
Do you think, Ed, will ever get a time in the next, say, decade or so where we can dispense with traditional lights? I mean, that really frees up the designer, doesn't it, if you could do something like this?
Well, it's funny you ask about traditional lights. Traditional lights were actually kind of round, and you kind of screw them in, But they have evolved over time, and, through composites and all kinds of very creative executions. This is kind of the next step.
you know, I remember when I think they were, what, 7 or 9 inch round lights?
Yeah.
And then I think you had in the 80s, you had kind of the square lights that came on maybe in the 70s.
And there are 2 sizes of rectangles. And then he came to much more of a composite lamp, and you could really shape them however you wanted to. They had to be within a zone, they had to function. But now, you know, there's some wild things that are happening with lighting.
Ed, back in the 70s and 80s, did you have to essentially design a car around bumpers and lights because those were things that were static and you really couldn't change how they looked?
You still do, but you've...
but you can change their shape now.
Everyone's learned how to interpret the rules. And it was really a challenge, I would say, mainly in the 70s, with bumper systems, with fuel economy, with all kinds of regulations about headlamps and their location. They still have tremendous rules around where a headlamp is located on a vehicle. It's just designers over time have learned how to work with those rules.
How much of an impact does it make when the rules change and a designer has to literally adapt overnight to what the new regulations are for a particular car?
Yeah, and that was a huge challenge in the 70s because those rules were constantly changing and everyone's just scratching their head. How do you interpret those rules? And with bumper systems larger and smaller, I consider it more of a challenge than a problem. I love taking on a challenge, you know, and great things can happen over time. You know, bumpers seem to be very well integrated. They perform as well, if not better, than those early big log chrome bumpers that we had.
You really straddled that transition between the traditional chrome bumper and then the 5-mile-an-hour impact bumper.
Yeah.
How difficult was that to really not spoil the lines of a car, especially when you were talking about sports cars or anything else like that?
I was lucky to come in near the end of the chrome bumpers. And because those who have spent their career designing cars with chrome bumpers, early on they put them wherever they wanted to put them or whatever made sense. And they were really having trouble interpreting all the new safety rules. For me, the safety rules pretty much handed them day one when I walked in, so it was a bit easier for me.
Is this something you think, Ed, that 30 years from now or 50 years from now, people will look back and go, I mean, this really was the golden age of supercar design?
I think in some cases they will. I don't know how well known this particular car is among all the supercars.
But it is a Bugatti, and that really does speak for something.
It is a Bugatti, and supercars are making a huge mark on the industry, and their influence will trickle down to all other types of vehicles. I think designers who are developing very affordable cars will be inspired by these cars in a big way.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for showing us around this.
Yeah.